This is Baxter Colburn, host of the Verse of the Day podcast. Thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media.
This is Liz Colburn, host of the Morning Uplift here on Public House Media. Thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media. Once you are done with this episode, I hope you'll come back and check out my show, The Morning Uplift, where we talk about finding your beauty in the journey. A new show comes out twice a month on the first and third Mondays. Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes so you never miss an episode of The Morning Uplift. Thank you again for checking out the following broadcast on Public House Media.
Hello and welcome to Your Soccer Passport here on Public House Media. My name is Brice Burge.
And I'm Ivan Sanchez Carrasco. Today we're going to talk about some MLS playoffs, La Liga in Spain, but we're going to kick things off down in Mexico where La Liga MX Super Classico just happened between Chivas and America.
Your Soccer Passport is sponsored by Squadcast. As podcasters that deal with analysts and guests from around the world, being able to record remotely is key. Current industry standards rely heavily on internet connection, but Squadcast changes that with a simple browser-based tool that requires no additional software to install. The audio is recorded locally as high-quality WAV files, then uploaded to the host computer, allowing some solid audio quality. To get started with your remote podcasting recording experience, go to squadcast.fm for your 14-day free trial. Let's start off with the Super Classico, Chivas de Guadalajara and Club America facing off. America has the all-time advantage, 82-74, with 72 draws. That total was added to on Sunday, where the teams drew 1-1. Alan Pulido scoring for Guadalajara in the 59th minute, and it took all the way to the 81st minute before Andres Ibargüen was able to add one in for Club America. Lots of storylines with this one. Where do you want to start off, though, Yvonne?
It's got to be the last minute of the game. 94th minute, 95th minute, 5 minutes of added time for Club America, and they're pushing for the win. They got the momentum. They got the goal in a game that they had kind of more of the control for over Chivas. They got behind, and then they kind of kept fighting through. And then in the last minute, Godinho, the goalkeeper, Raul Godinho for Chivas, just wrecks one of the America players. And then America go on and miss the following PK in what was literally the last play of the game. Right after the Godin save, the ref called for time, and that was kind of the big takeaway because America kind of took over the game again the last half of the game, and we're pushing for that draw, and then after the draw, we're pushing for that win. And it looked like they had it right there. The way the players were celebrating the foul, and the way the momentum was going, it looked like America was going to win on the final kick. And the Godin comes up in goal and blocks it and gives Chivas a point to keep them kind of in the playoff hunt.
Yeah, these two teams are heading different directions, but I mean, I look at this right now and I see the way that all the players were celebrating. They definitely counted their chickens before the eggs hatched. And for me, especially after reading up on the Copa MX loss for America and seeing how Miguel Herrera just completely lost it in describing on that entire loss on Carlos Vargas, in the penalty kicks, and then to lose this game in this key rivalry game on a saved penalty kick is just obscene to me, because not only did you have two teams that had really surprising eliminations in the Copa loss, but now they're on two different ends of the table as Guadalajara needs this extra push. They need the extra points. And now what are we to think about these two teams, because they've just come out of a bad loss for each one of them to second tier programs, and now they're both tying with their major rival. And to tie with a major rival, is that enough of a momentum for somebody kind of get going? I mean, America did drop from second to third, but for Guadalajara, they need a lot more to get back into the playoff hunt and push up that table. And I don't know if any of these teams could be happy minimalizing the damage that they did in this game.
I think it depends. If you're Chivas, you take the draw as a win, especially in the manner that it happened. It's a last minute block and it saves you a point instead of losing a point. For America, when you're at home and you kind of fought your way back and you put yourself in this position to win on the last kick, that's when the draw feels like a defeat. For those who don't know much about Liga MX, the top 8 teams in the league, which is a team of 18, will go into a playoff, and 1 through 8, 2 through 7, kind of a typical knockout style. And so there is room for error in that regard because the top 8 of the 18 get in. Chivas find themselves with 11 games played and 6 games to go. They're tied for 8th right now with Pachuca, but are in 9th place with a goal differential. And Club America is technically in 2nd place, tied with Santos Laguna with 21 points, and goal differential again is what pushes them to 2nd. But a lot of it has to do with momentum. There's 6 games left in the regular season. Again, for those who don't know Liga MX, it's kind of split into two shortened seasons instead of one longer one, with 2 playoffs after the end of the 17-game regular seasons for both. But yeah, Chivas, a lot of it is now they're both out of the Copa, especially with America losing to Juarez from 2nd division. Chivas losing at home to Pumas for the first time in 32 years on Wednesday as well. A lot of it's about momentum. Can you guys get rolling now with 6 games left in the regular season to be in a good position to make the playoffs? Those kind of so that's where maybe this draw can push Chivas a little bit, where it kind of feels like a victory. And for America, can you bounce back after the ruck weave you've had?
I mean, honestly, for me, when I look at these 2 teams, that they have positions to go, but it almost seems that they're going in opposite directions, and one that's going to help them converge in a 4-5 matchup the way that the playoffs are set up. But I mean, even in that regard, it's not, there were a lot of discussions about potentially Herrera on the hot seat in America. There was discussions about unhappiness there, and I always have to take it with a grain of salt and with a giant boulder at the same time, because in Mexican soccer there's so much influence from different ownership groups and the press and the public as a whole that it makes it difficult sometimes to know what is legitimate and what is not legitimate in terms of understanding how unhappy or how happy somebody is with a person in that role. And for a guy like Miguel Herrera, who is consistently pushing the envelope and talking about players and giving good sound bites and getting into the soap opera of Liga MX that can further that potential, definitely makes me want to bring it back a little bit, that maybe he's not as in a hot seat scenario, but that was something that was being pushed as a storyline to go up before this big thing. I think the question is now is can, like you said, can they get the momentum going when you have 2 losses that you have a loss and a draw, but ones that ultimately do not matter in certain end goal scenarios. You still have a very good spot on the table. You still have a very good spot moving forward. Your players are healthier than some of the players in Monterrey or with Pumas right now. So that's something that you have an advantage above the other people. It's just a matter of, is this enough to say that you don't have enough to fight for the ultimate title this year? And honestly, I think not having to deal with Copa distractions is going to make them a little bit better. But I think America is doing all right. I think the question now is Guadalajara, can they move up? And I'm not sure if they can. They're still struggling to put together 90 minutes of soccer, and even though they've had some good games, they're against some of the weakest opponents. So for them right now, I think they just need to string together a good 90 minutes and then start from there. And it may be too late So I think that Guadalajara has got to be the team that we kind of focus on in terms of what are they going to be able to do than America, even though that I think more people want to focus on America right now.
Yeah, with Chivas has been just a lack of inconsistency. Like you said, they haven't been able to put a full game together. Today, America looked better for the 90 minutes. And, can you string together consistent performances? Quickly to touch again on America before I start talking a little bit more about Chivas. America, with 4 of their 6 games left, are against Cruz Azul, Santos, Toluca, and Tigres, 4 of the strongest teams in Liga MX. Tigres have been kind of inconsistent this year in the league, but it's still probably the most talented 1 through 11 starting lineup you can put together in Mexican soccer, and definitely the most consistent team year in, year out in Mexican soccer. For Chivas, they have a few more easier games down the stretch, but when they are expected to win, can they get the points needed? And at the end of the day, both Chivas and America are going to be judged if they make the playoffs once they're in there, what they do. Miguel Herrera can finish first or second in the table, but if he doesn't deliver a championship, he's not delivering trophies, he's not delivering finals appearances, that's where he's going to be judged, especially because, like you mentioned, he does like the sound bites, and he is a person who loves the media attention. So with that, when things are going well, it works for him. But when things aren't going well and he's not getting results, that's when it come back to bite you. And with a club like America, both so decorated, with so much pressure, something he knows as he's the coach there, that comes with responsibility. And if he doesn't get results, those sound bites quickly turn into kind of just empty promises, and just, it's hard. You need to win, especially with clubs like America, who hold themselves to this high standards of degree, being the most successful team in Mexico, along with Chivas. So it's 2 teams who feel pressure, but especially America right now with the position they're in, and Miguel Herrera, who's after his return has been there for a couple of years now. So we'll see what happens down the stretch, and once we kind of get in the playoff mode, what happens with them.
You did make mention about some of the other teams at the top of the table. I do not know Liga MX as much as I should. I will admit that, but that's because I typically watch the MLS and I will watch Bundesliga, but I think a lot of that has to do with availability of broadcasting compared to times that I'm available to watch soccer. But with that coming up, you've got Azul at the top of the table, 7-2-2. America, Santos, they're 6-3-2. Monterrey, Pumas, Toluca, Tigre, and Pachuca are your next ones. And Querétaro is also down there as well. With a lot of those teams, pretty much everybody from 8-11 there with a 4-3-4 record. It's really just goals and goal differentials breaking up all that big chunk of teams there. Out of all the teams so far that you've got a lineup for, who can make a big difference in terms of making the playoffs, and who do you really expect to kind of take the top there?
I think it'll be interesting. Cruz Azul are interesting because they're one of the big, in Mexico, we consider big 4, with Pumas as well, Club America and Chivas. But they haven't won a championship since 1998. And they're kind of seen as this like failing club who just can't win a championship. And they've kind of become slightly a laughing stock. A lot of Mexican memes about their failures. And this is the first season they've really been playing really well. And can they handle that pressure of playing really well and being on top of La Liga MX? Because now the fans are going to be expecting and wanting a championship to see if they matched up against a team like Tigres, who are very talented, the 2 teams from Monterrey, who have constantly been in the playoffs and been battling for championships. Can they? That would be an interesting matchup and dynamic, because you have 2 clubs in the last 10 years who have kind of changed identities and changed the way people kind of see them in Mexico, like see soccer. Now Tigres and Monterrey, the other team from Monterrey, are kind of seen as some of the best ran clubs, some of the smartest clubs with their money, and the most consistent. So if you're like a casual fan watching Liga MX, watch Monterrey, watch Tigres. Toluca is always an interesting team because they play in this very this very small field outside of Mexico City in a town called Toluca, and it's a very passionate fan base, and it's small, and they but it's one that knows their soccer, and it's one that it's a very intimidating place to play at. So those are kind of teams to watch out if you're kind of casual fan. And the best thing is once you kind of hit that playoff, those 8 teams, then it kind of starts. It's a whole new season now because the team who can have momentum can really come in and sneak one over the teams who've kind of been a little more consistent at the end.
And I think that's a big deal because ultimately that you have relegation battles all the time, and we see that in other leagues. We don't see playoffs as often as possible. And in this case, there's a big, hard fight in Liga MX for those last 2 playoff spots. Last 3, even if you wanna include Tigres in there, even though that Tigres is just a win compared to a draw away from that big hullabaloo there for, or not Tigres, but Toluca. Because Toluca is at 6-1-4, they either win or lose, and so that a little bit wilder play that they bring in is a lot of fun for casual fans. Because I've seen a couple of Toluca games this year, and they're very high risk and very high reward playing style, which I appreciate. I think a lot of fans of MLS will appreciate their style out on the pitch. So there's lots of things to start paying attention to, especially now as we reach near the end of the season, or at least this pre-playoff season in Liga MX, and we've got another league here that is also dealing with the end of the season. The Supporter Shield is in sight for the MLS, and we're going to talk about that up next here on Your Soccer Passport. Time now for Worldwide Headlines here on Your Soccer Passport, a segment touching on some of the other big news from around the soccer world. 8 fans were taken to a hospital after a barrier collapsed at a La Liga match. The game was held at Eibar's Apura Stadium as Sevilla supporters celebrated their second goal in their 3-1 win. None of the injuries are life-threatening, according to Eibar's Twitter account. An alleged rape involving an American woman and Juventus star Cristiano Ronaldo is making waves. The alleged incident happened in Las Vegas, Nevada in 2009, and a $375,000 settlement, including a non-disclosure agreement, was already reached out of court directly related to the incident. However, a new attorney for the woman believes that the agreement is not legally binding, leading to a report in the German publication Der Spiegel. Ronaldo has denied any wrongdoing in the issues, and his attorney said in a statement that they will be seeking redress against Der Spiegel and that the claim is, quote, an inadmissible reporting of suspicions of privacy. And with a few weeks to go, the Chinese Super League has turned into a 2-horse race as Shanghai East Asia and Guangzhou Evergrande FC are at the top of the leaderboard. The 2 highest scoring sides in the league both have 6 games left in the season and are slated against each other one last time on November 3rd. Today's Worldwide Headlines are brought to you by the Public House Media Store Envy Online Shop. The best way to promote Your Soccer Passport and any other PHM shows is with t-shirts, mugs, and more, all available in the Store Envy shop. Visit publichousemedia.storeenvy.com. That's STORENVY.com. And welcome back to Your Soccer Passport. Brice Birch here with Ivan Sanchez Carrasco. Don't be afraid to interact with us on social media because we'd like to hear from you. The show is on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. On Twitter, we also have individual profiles. He is Ivan Sanchez C90. I am at that Brice Birch, Brice with an I. Which I'm thinking that it's my spelling, which is why I don't have anybody interact with me, because everybody loves interacting with Ivan on social media. He is a hot commodity, that is for sure, with his soccer knowledge. All right, let's talk a little bit about the MLS playoff hunt. They are in sight, but right now I think the big talk is about the shakeup near the top for that number 1 overall seed in the Supporter Shield. That is the 2-0 victory by the New York Red Bulls against Atlanta United. That makes things really shaken up at the top spot, not just for the East, but overall. Out West, the race is considerably tighter, including a different team in 6th place seemingly every week. Right now, Real Salt Lake has it, and they are holding off the highest scoring team in that conference at LA Galaxy. They are on the outside looking in. Up top, though, it would be FC Dallas that is holding on to that top spot, and they have clinched a playoff spot with their draw this last week. So let's start talking about MLS and the playoff hunt. Do you want to start in the East or do you want to start in the West?
I think we got to go East the way the game this weekend between Atlanta and the Red Bulls. Atlanta really had a chance to give themselves a 4-point cushion with 3 games left. And Red Bulls came up and they answered big time. This is possibly an Eastern Conference final matchup. And you saw the Red Bulls just take it to Atlanta today and kind of give themselves a good position to not only win the East, but as you mentioned, win the Supporter Shield. And if they win out, host the MLS Cup Finals, which goes to the team who has the best record between the Eastern Conference champions and the Western Conference champions. So that makes the East a lot more interesting going towards the end. And the way that kind of the rest of the East breaks up, you have New York City FC kind of in the middle in that third spot, 5-point lead over Columbus with a game in hand. It's kind of almost, or with 1 game less to play, but still 5 points is quite a lot to make up in 2 or 3 games. So they kind of look locked up for that third spot. Then after that, you have Montreal and DC battling out for that last spot with DC 2 games in hand, 2 points out. A win leaps them over that, and they've been a team that kind of has gone momentum over the last couple weeks ever since Rooney showed up. So a lot of different smaller storylines in the Eastern Conference.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when looking at DC with what they've been able to do with Rooney and Acosta and all those guys down there, they've really started to get their offense on track. I think that was really highlighted by that 5-0 thrashing of Montreal the other day. Shooting for 5 was no problem for them. But, I mean, for DC United, what's going to happen now that they're in momentum, if they continue with that winning process? I think DC United has some interesting potential here with 5 games left. 2 are against Chicago. 1 is against Toronto. And then they do have 2 tough games against FC Dallas and New York City. But ultimately, with 2 games against Chicago, man, that makes things look a little nicer, since Chicago is sitting at 8-7-16 with a negative 11 goal differential. They do not look like they are somebody that can potentially steal one and cause a split with DC. So the United are really looking to be in the catbird seat, even though that they aren't necessarily in that spot. And I think they will be a little dangerous too once they get into the playoffs and see what they can potentially have as they move forward. Also in the East, I'm a little interested in Philadelphia because I don't know how to deal with them. You know, Philadelphia has an amazing goaltender in Blake. They have a solid core group of defensemen, but they still have 45 goals allowed, and they have a negative 2 goal differential. They're continuing to surprise people. They had a very good Open Cup run. They've had some really solid games that they've strung together, and they just kind of sit there. They're just kind of there. In Columbus, we haven't talked a lot about either this year because there's, whenever it seems that we talk about the Columbus Crew, it's always whether or not they're attached to that controversial possible relocation to Austin, and that's kind of a weird thing too. So like we haven't really been talking about Columbus or Philadelphia at all this year, and here they sit in 4th and 5th. Literally really close to each other, just 1 point separating them. And if that stays, that's the difference between home in that playoff battle. And I'm kind of surprised about the lack of coverage that either of those teams are getting compared to the rest of the East.
Yeah, I think part of it has to do that, number one, Columbus is going through this thing with a possible relocation to Austin. You have Philly, who was for a while kind of in the bottom of the East, and they really turned it around this season. And it doesn't help the top 3 teams. 2 of them are the New York markets, and then you have Atlanta, who's kind of this new car that everybody loves to drive when they talk about the MLS, when you talk about playing in the Benz Stadium and having 70,000 people show up. They've kind of like this new hot commodity in that regard. So that's kind of where it seems that both Columbus and Philly have kind of gotten lost. But you bring up an interesting point. They're 1 point off to each other, and that looks like it's going to be the matchup in the wild card, one of the wild card matchups in the East, Philly and Columbus. And now it's a battle with 9 points left and 1 point separating Columbus and Philly, who hosts between those two. And especially for Columbus, because it looks there's a very high chance that they could be going to Austin. Can these players deliver something for the Columbus crowd, one of the original MLS teams, and one of their when still playing in that original one of the first soccer stadiums?
To continue on that, my surprising stat for this segment is that looking at the goals scored for everybody in the MLS, and the Philadelphia Union does not have a player that is scoring in the top 35 players in the MLS, but Barek Dakal is sitting tied for second with most assists. Their possession is very good. I believe that even though that they're not scoring goals as flashy as Atlanta is, because I do think, in addition to all the other stuff, having Joseph Martinez there chasing down and demolishing a single season goals record, going 30 for 30 right now, is something that is also very flashy and taking stuff away from the rest of the conference. But it is surprising to me to see those teams go at it. And I think that's going to be a surprisingly good matchup if the standings hold, and that's what we have for one of those wild card matchups. Let's shift it over. Let's talk about the West, because the West is a heck of a lot closer. And because you don't have Atlanta and New York rushing out to those 19 win points that they are. Right now you have FC Dallas with 15-9-6. 54 points sitting on top of the conference, but you go all the way down to Minnesota United in ninth place with 36 points, and theoretically they could still potentially jump up with games in hand. But that being said, I haven't double check that against schedules, but they are close enough to play spoilers. So, same thing could be said about Houston Dynamo, who goes out and wins the Open Cup, sitting in 10th in that conference. And so you've got FC Dallas up top, Sporting Kansas City second, LAFC, which again, brand new car, brand new team, brand new situation with Bradley in there as coach, and haven't heard nearly as much about them compared to the New York teams out east still. Portland sitting in fourth, Seattle fifth, Real Salt Lake, LA Galaxy, Vancouver wrapping out your top 8. And it feels like all 4 of those teams have been in multiple different positions so far this year. With Minnesota United up there for a little bit, and they've backed off a little bit now. It's tough to talk about this Western Conference just because it is also wildly different, but at the same time so consistently close.
Yeah, I think it's been a conference that's kind of been mirrored by a lack of consistency. I think in the East, you talk about Atlanta, New York, and Red Bulls and New York FC kind of having a little more consistency game in and game out. For example, here in Portland, you have Portland, who started the season 6 games on the road. They couldn't get a victory. I think they only were able to get like a couple of draws, and then they went on, I think, a 13-14 game streak without losing. And they've kind of leveled out from there, and that's kind of been the West in a nutshell. I believe Seattle had themselves a 9-game run as well, if I'm not mistaken, or something along those lines, that they started poorly and got themselves back in this playoff position as too. So it's been a conference mirrored by streaks. You have, like you said, the Galaxy, who has 60 goals, and they're not even in the playoff position right now, which is kind of crazy to think in that regard. And big, I do want to mention LAFC, because big hats off to Bob Bradley, because he's been doing a great job with the team that he has and what he's been able to do. Because even though there's not as much flash or pop and circumstance with them as with Atlanta, there is this consistency, and I like their style of play, and I like what he's been doing. And I think it's good to see him in the MLS after kind of what he's been through all throughout Europe, and really give this team, it seems a little more, there's this consistency and this kind of like this level-headed attack through LAFC, which I've really enjoyed watching them play.
They do have a really entertaining product. It's just one that doesn't necessarily translate to readability. When they have good plays, it's good touching off the ball, it's good passing, it's good setups that lead to, looks of a set piece that aren't actually a set piece, and trying to describe that motion and the artistic beauty of what LAFC has been able to do in motion is hard to describe in words. You really have to see it to believe it, and it isn't always done. They've got a number of players with that roster that really makes that team pop. I think they're very well rounded in that regard, and the question is can this be a team that hits the momentum? And I think that's ultimately what you have to deal with any team out in the West, with the exception of maybe Dallas, because even Sporting Kansas City has shown some inconsistencies in whether or not they are truly there for all 90 minutes. I know I said that in the first segment, but Kansas City is the saxophone player of the MLS right now. When they make a mistake, they, everybody knows that they make a mistake, not necessarily because they hear it, but because they react so ridiculous to it. If Kansas City makes a mistake, then somebody's throwing a fit on the sidelines, or they're all throwing a fit about it in terms of their play for the next 5 minutes, and they have to eventually get over themselves and have a good play before they can get going again. It's been frustrating in that regard, because Kansas City, I think, is a better team than FC Dallas, but it's just not coming together for them consistently. Which I think has to deal a lot with some of the issues going on at their home arena. There's multiple questions about their manager being tabbed as the potential new U.S. men's national team coach. It's just there's a number of things that are causing distractions in Kansas City that I think is kind of taken away from their play, which I think is unfortunate, because we talk about LAFC and how difficult it is to describe all the good things that they're doing, but it's also hard on the other side of things to talk about Kansas City, who continually have a bunch of X factors away from the pitch that take away from a game that I think is generally received as one of the most consistent products in the MLS right now.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of been the thing with everybody in the West for one time or the other. And I mean, it's not only the Kansas City coach that has to do with this. Earlier this week, something you should keep an eye on is Tito Martinez being mentioned as a Colombian coach and as the potential coach for Mexico over at Atlanta. And these are things that can distract a team and can distract a club, especially so close toward the end of the season. And I know we mentioned in the past we both like the Kansas City coach as a potential MLS or national team coach. But I mean, yeah, this is what makes it so much. This is what makes the MLS fun: is top 6 go in, the top 2 get a bye into the semis, and then you have the 4 teams in a playoff. And Kansas City is 2 points off of winning the West, but they're also 2 points off of falling out of the top 2 and now being in a wild card game too. So these last couple weeks are going to be interesting to see who can make it out. I think it's going to be rough for LA to get enough wins in these next 2-3 games to leapfrog both Seattle or Real Salt Lake. I think Real Salt Lake probably might have enough to make into the playoffs, and then veering off with a small chance is Vancouver. Unfortunately for them, shout out to my boy Eric Hurtado up top playing forward for them. But yeah, it's 3 games left, 9 points. It's difficult to get every result you need to put yourself in a situation to make the playoffs if you're in the outside looking in the West.
Absolutely, and for LA, they got a game up against Sporting Kansas City right off the bat on Saturday, October 6th. That's their next game. They've got Minnesota United and Houston Dynamo after that. They're winnable games, maybe, for LA. I mean, at this point, unless you're Zlatan Ibrahimovic, you're not necessarily showing a lot of things of why LA should be making the playoffs. But at the same exact time, if you don't make the playoffs, you're not keeping Zlatan. Ibrahimovic has shown a lot of pizzazz, even more than I think what he brought into other places, because the guy is is Ibrahimovic. He's going to do what he does, and that's fine. That's the reason why you brought him here. That's the reason why he just goes up and just Chuck Norris's his 500 goal and slides that thing in with the power and grace of some very powerful things. Like, I can't even think of anything that would both combine the power and artistic abilities that he scored his 500 goal with. And you see, the thing is, he's still got it, but yet we're still sitting here waiting about what the Galaxy can do to either keep him and or make the playoffs. Because if he doesn't make the playoffs, I don't think he stays. And what is LA going to do after that? I mean, I can't imagine them being able to hold on to anybody in that roster once Ibrahimovic leaves. They're going to have some problems there moving forward for LA, and it will be truly an interesting situation for them as well, because they are now not the only show in town. Before, LA only handled one market. Chivas USA, folded miserably and was kind of a joke from inception. But now LA also has two actual football teams, not just soccer teams. They have the Chargers and they have the Rams. The Rams look amazing. Chargers held on to a rough victory against the 49ers today, which may be a little bit too close to home for Ivan here, but I don't know. The Chargers do need a kicker, but it's frustrating right now to deal with that kind of stuff and see what LA has, because they should be able to have a good team, and I don't know, just Galaxy are struggling right now to be consistent.
Yeah, and that's the problem with the MLS. You do need to have some consistency going into it, but I mean, that's what makes this league interesting and fun, is all the different teams that can't have a chance at the MLS Cup. So we'll see what happens leading this last month into the regular season.
With that, going into everything we've touched on the MLS pretty in depth. Is there anything that we did not talk about that you do want to talk about regarding the MLS?
No, I think we nailed it. I think this has been a fun episode. 2 segments instead of 3 like we usually do, but throwing something new out there for you guys.
Yeah, it's been a chance since we've actually had the ability to just kind of relax and cut loose on some of these topics. It does mean that we didn't talk about La Liga, and that's something that I think this show desperately needs us to talk a little bit more about, but at the same time is something that I think hasn't been as newsworthy compared to some of the other stuff that we've had a chance to talk about. That being said, we will talk about it next week. In addition to our biggest guest to date, we're going to have the champion of the NWSL, Jessica McDonald from the NC Courage. She's going to come onto the show and talk with us about the title run, the greatest, is it the greatest season, and all these other amazing questions. So if you are listening to this, you have approximately 4 hours once this is released to get us some questions and we can ask her. So get on the horn and respond to us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. If you know us personally, call us, email. I would say the snail mail, but that definitely will not get to us in time. So just do what you can if you got any questions for Miss McDonald. Until then, remember to subscribe to Your Soccer Passport on iTunes, Spotify, and wherever your favorite podcasts are found. I'm Brice Burge.
I'm Ivan Sanchez Carrasco. See you guys. Thank you.
You've just listened to Your Soccer Passport on Public House Media.